A reunion full of history, an unresolved past, and names carrying heavy expectations. The Lions preseason has barely begun, and it's already shaping up to be anything but dull. Dan Campbell is reconnecting with familiar faces, while key figures on the roster and coaching staff are facing decisions that could change the team's trajectory. There's tension in the air, critical tests ahead, and much more on the way. Go ahead and hit that like button, because these updates from Detroit are going to spark a lot of discussion. Alright folks, it's shaping up to be a spicy preseason for the Detroit Lions, who just locked in their joint practice opponents for 2025, and we're getting a couple of juicy matchups. First up, Detroit's gonna link up with the Miami Dolphins during week 2 of the preseason ahead of their game on August 16th. These two squads haven't squared off since 2022, back when the Lions were still trying to figure themselves out in year 2 of the Dan Campbell era. That one ended in a heartbreaking 31-27 loss in Detroit, dropping them to 1-6. But let's not forget they rallied, clawed their way to 98, and almost cracked the postseason, and there's a little extra heat in this Miami matchup. Campbell's got history with the Dolphins. He was their tight ends coach from 2011 to 2015 and even stepped in as interim head coach that final year. So, this one's personal. What really makes this session interesting is that it'll be the first real test for a bunch of Detroit's defensive playmakers coming off injuries. That front seven turned into a MASH unit late last season and things went downhill fast. The Lions were finally rocking an elite defense again, first one in over a decade, and then boom, injuries wrecked everything, including a gut-wrenching playoff loss to the Commanders. Before clashing with Miami, the Lions kick off their preseason campaign at the Hall of Fame game against the Chargers on July 31st in Canton. Then it's off to Atlanta on August 8th to take on the Falcons in a primetime showdown. Those games give the rookies some burn, especially with Detroit having an extra preseason tilt this year. But honestly, joint practices are where the real evaluations happen. Coaches can control the pace, run situational drills, and really get into the weeds without worrying about game clock nonsense. In the final week of preseason, the Texans roll into town for another joint practice, leading into a rematch of last year's wild 26-23 Lions win despite Jared Goff tossing 5 picks. That game was part of Detroit's march to a jaw-dropping 15-2 record and back-to-back division crowns. Now, eyes will be on how Dan Campbell handles things this time around. Last year's joint practice with the Giants? Total chaos. Fights broke out left and right. The plug got pulled early, and both teams got slapped with $200K fines. Not ideal, but Campbell's a grinder. He learns, he adjusts. And with new coordinators John Morton, offense, and Kelvin Shepard, defense, at the controls, these practices aren't just for players, they're a proving ground for the staff too. Let's just say, if you're into gritty football and behind-the-scenes drama, this Lions preseason is must-watch stuff. Will the joint practices with the Dolphins and Texans show growth or repeat the chaos of 2023? And speaking of chaos, the Broderick Martin situation is heating up even more. Alright, let's talk about the elephant in the Honolulu Blue Room because no one else seems to be saying it out loud. Broderick Martin, the big-bodied D-tackle Detroit grabbed in the 3rd round of the 2023 draft, is hanging on by a thread. And yeah, it's not looking good. Back when the Lions reached for Martin way earlier than most draft gurus had him going, there was hope that this Shrine Bowl standout could develop into a legit run-stuffer in the middle. Fast forward to now, and the guy can't even sniff the field unless someone ahead of him goes down hurt. That's a brutal reality for a dude taken in the top 100. The Lions have been all in on beefing up their run defense this offseason. GM Brad Holmes didn't just draft Ohio State's Tyleik Williams in the 1st round, he also brought back DJ Reader and Levi Onwuzurike. So that interior D-line, it's stacked. And Martin? He's buried under it. This is a guy who suited up in just 5 games across 2 seasons, partly due to injuries, sure, but also because when he has been healthy, he just hasn't impressed. Right now, Martin is basically a one-trick pony who eats space, but in the modern NFL, that doesn't cut it unless you're elite at it. With Aleem McNeil locked in as a core piece, and Williams ready to make an impact, there's just no room for dead weight. Add in Mekhi Wingo, a 2024 draft pick with upside, and Roy Lopez, Lopez, a solid veteran pickup from Arizona, and Martin suddenly looks like the odd man out. Look, he's still a former third rounder, and that means he'll get every chance to prove he belongs. Coaches love giving those guys a longer leash. But if he doesn't show serious progress in OTAs and the preseason, Dan Campbell and company might just pull the plug. This preseason isn't just important for Martin, it's a last stand. If he doesn't make a move now, he'll be watching the Lions from a couch instead of the sidelines. Campbell will have his hands full trying to maintain order and tempo at practice. But even worse is seeing a high draft pick like Martin turn into dead weight. His time is running out. If you're into this kind of deep analysis, subscribe so you don't miss anything from the Lions.